live stream in the back there. Let's do a quick check to see.
Hey everybody, how is the seating? We will have people that come late, we always do, so let's make sure they can get to the spare seats that are around as well. Awesome. So this is the Future Factory. This is my wife Shanti is somewhere, I don't know where she's gone. This is our little place, our little research place that we open as a venue or as a hackerspace sometimes and things like that. So bathrooms are at the back. There's only one at the moment, they're on the table. That's not quite right already. Not available. And so you can just go down. If you need to leave to the front door, just ignore the speakers. Sorry, I've got Cardi B playing. Sorry, I probably want Cardi B. She's awesome. So and this place is pretty cool. That's the only emergency exit. If you try and go out the fire stairs, you will die because there's no stairs. It's a 20-meter drop. So if you bounce, cool. Otherwise, don't. Or jump out the windows. So if there's anything that goes wrong here, just go down the stairs. There's not much actually in this door that can burn down except in here. Apart from that, what we do here is really just, we play with advanced technologies. We do have something called the Future Academy where we teach. The way we work is we teach things that no one else teaches. Meaning that if someone else starts teaching it, we just stop teaching it. Our aim is to primarily start something, whether it be drone blocks or teaching other new technologies that's going around. We kind of hope other people, academies and other places will actually take things up so there's more wider access to these things. But we like to worry about things that nobody is talking about. So that's kind of what this place does. Shanti and I also do research. We've got an organisation called the Future Crime Agency, which we advise law enforcement and military and everything, and I think Shanti's talking a little bit later, or we are, I don't know what I'm doing yet. And tonight we've got, who's speaking? Sorry,
I'll do a quick intro. Yeah.
Thanks, Skip. Round of applause for Skip. Thanks for having us. Thanks for coming, everyone. My name's Xing. I'm one of the co-founders of Transhumanism AU, and welcoming to Skip and Shanti's Future Factory here. You can see that this is entirely his consciousness in a wrapped up workshop. So today we're going to be
12-year-old brain.
His 12-year-old brain, exactly. So this place, Ski was talking about as soon as something gets adopted by someone else, we stop teaching it. So what a hell of a month. What a month it's been. So how fast is technology moving? Just this month alone, when we heard from Elon Musk already that he was going to develop something like humans must merge with machines because that's the only way we can keep up with AI, right? You describe this Neuralink device as, a chip and a bunch of wires, right? But he's actually done it, so just this month, they've announced what it actually looked like over the last 2 years. And what a hell, 2 years, and this is the amount of development that they've done. Shanti was going to do a more detailed talk on Neuralink, but I think she's got even more cooler things to talk about.
We're talking about weaponizing toys now.
Yeah, exactly. So this probably can be weaponized too. And as part of the live stream that happened only a couple of weeks ago, he's actually revealed that this is working on a monkey who was able to control a computer with its brain.
It's not a polite way to refer to one of his employees.
Yeah, exactly. All the monkeys out there, right? And these, you can see what these wires are. They're actually about a quarter of the length of a human hair. And they actually need a robot to deploy this because the accuracy required to avoid things like blood vessels, other cells, other neurons, those are the sort of things you want to stay away from. And also advancing in the form of material science in order to allow it to shift as the brain moves in a human body. So, if you think about our brains, it's constantly moving as we're moving and as we're breathing. So this needs to be flexible and bend along with the human brain.
Does everybody understand that Elon Musk, that's actually his secret power? It's not the tech that he's doing, it's the deployment of it. So it's not about space, it's the reusable rockets. It's not about Hyperloop, it's about the boring company underground. It's not about the brain neural interlink, it's about how to put it in. Everything he does, it's about how you can execute the cool stuff, not actually the cool stuff. That's the sort of secondary part. But if you look at everything he does, it's the way you actually execute that. Like the gigafactories enable the building of all the Teslas. So he held up with the actual way to do it.
So he's actually seen the Wait But Why article, explaining how this neural link is happening. Again, so maybe we started a bit too deep. Who's been to one of these meetups before? Just put your hands up. Okay, about half the room. I think who hasn't been here before?
We're going to factor
Great, fantastic, welcome.
We're going to not scare them so much.
Yeah, that's right. So today is actually we're talking about the future of artificial intelligence, and this could be the future of AI when humans are able to merge with AI. So this is a brain-machine interface, a mechanism for us to keep up with technology. So this is Elon Musk's vision. He starts from first principles, as Steve was saying. It's not just about creating things for the sake of things, but actually building on top, business model-wise, creating something that makes money. So they're solving real problems with this for people with dementia, with brain problems, and essentially trying to solve those sort of issues right now.
Did you see the other announcement the other day for Elon?
Yeah,
His Open AI.
that's right.
He's got a company called Open AI, which basically he thinks AI is going to kill us all. So he started an AI company, think to kill us all. But Microsoft just put $1 billion into it last week.
Yeah.
$1
billion, right? Yeah, so much for the open piece, right? Yeah, that's right. So this is what the Ant1 implant actually looks like. So it is a chip with a tiny bunch of wires. And you can see that this little white device here, that's essentially called the link. So that's going to be a future product when they get all these FDA approvals and monetizing it. And we'll get to OpenAI in a sec because that's one of the things he did step away from. But he initially started that as a co-founder, and it said, look, the super intelligence is coming. We're not going to be able to keep up. So how do we mitigate and make sure, try to lean towards a positive version of super intelligence? How do we embed human values, our values, into the development of these AIs? And I think we've got Anne here from Surround Australia talking about that around AI. But this is what the product might look like. So this is essentially developing over the last 2 years what that future product lineup will look like. And we talked about this, I think a few meetups ago around how over the next 10 years, how our iPhones will become essentially smarter and smarter, and will be more integrated with our smart devices. And this might be the iPhone 20. So yeah, this is one of the things we covered.
Yeah, but we won't have one because they'll be 40 grand.
Yeah, exactly. And this guy probably paid a lot of money for his first version, right? He's an early adopter. Neil Harbison. So he's actually sensing different colors, and that's creating a vibration in his head. So he's colorblind.
He hears that, right? He hears color.
Yeah, it's vibrations as well. But yeah, he's probably one of the early adopters of this brain-machine interface technology. And so if you want to read a bit more about it, I've covered this in an article. These QR codes, essentially, when you're trying to take a photo of it, it brings it up to the website. But yeah, over the next 10 years, hopefully this is something that Neuralink and Apple and merging that together will bring to the mass market.
Do you think it'll take that long?
Ooh, I think 5 years' time they might have human, the readily available products, but for the disabled. And then over the next 5 years, it'll be more enabled people to be able to apply it.
Because there's a few things coming at it. We've got transcranial direct current simulation. We've got the Halo Sport. We've got the Halo Mind coming out soon, which is supposed to enhance the speed. We've got it's coming out from about 5 different angles. It's like robotics. We would actually have the first perfect robot. We've actually got the perfect robot. It's just in parts across 20 companies. And if you've got Sony and Boston and all the different companies together, we've actually got it. It's just they don't share. Yeah.
And making it mass market as well. So, Apple's, too bad the chief design officer left, right? So, Johnny Ives is left, but they've got that sort of secret sauce around how to design it so that people will want to wear it as opposed to just need to wear it for functionality.
The example is smartwatches. There was 300,000-400,000 sold over 2 years. And then Apple released the Apple Watch, and it was 1 million in a day. So while we might not like Apple, and for some reasons, we love Apple when they bring something out. VR AR has not been able to be consumerized. When the Apple thing comes out, it will be everywhere instantly, and it will enable a lot of the things that we've all been playing and talking for a long time. But it's when Apple does it, the world pays attention. Everyone thinks it's the first time oh, look, wow, the first smartwatch. And everyone's like, but when Apple does it, it makes it real for the whole planet.
And then the cheap version will come out from China as well.
Yeah,
exactly. That's it. So other developments this month, Facebook and Carnegie Mellon, they've collaborated on this AI that can beat 6-player World Series of poker, right? This is the Texas Hold'em level poker, and so it's able to understand how to bluff, how to understand all the probabilities of this.
Is this the way to get the $7 billion?
This is actually how you actually make money online, right? So if they just release this out of the public on, say, PokerStars or World Series of Poker.
They just got $7 billion fine.
Yeah.
So this is
$5 billion.
Yeah, that's right. Send it to the World Series of Poker. You're going to make that $7 billion back.
And you just saw the winners, how hard they grind and have to calculate really quickly. This does it automatically, but also be able to keep track on when to bluff, and what the probabilities of bluffing, and when to call other people's bluffs as well. Yeah. And like you said,
is it playing against real people?
Hey?
Does it play against real people?
Yeah.
So is it using like body language and micro-expression detection? And
yeah. So that's pluribus. Pluribus there, playing online. Not like a robot playing person, but yeah, this is the online person. And you can see how it's got Queen Jack, and this human player, this poor human player, no idea, he's got Queen 10, and this is a Queen 9-7 spread, right? So it knows that the other person's got a strong hand, so it'll stick together. What they found is that they'll actually overbet the pot. So, typically you bet maybe half the size of the pot, or the size of the pot if you just want to, try to get some money out of it. This AI started realizing a new strategy of overbetting, so 2 to 3 times the size of the pot. And it's able to make more return that way when it knows there's a pretty good probability of giving the other person a call, and it's going to win their hand. Pretty cool developments, and that the pros are actually starting to learn from as well. So just like with Dota 2, with StarCraft, with chess and Go,
Dota 2 was terrifying.
Yeah, that's right. But these are essentially starting to inform human players how to improve their own strategies. Just like, Gary Kasparov was saying, the sort of the human AI augmentation is starting to impact poker as well.
Well, it's going in reverse now, because with Dota 2, all the world's best Dota 2 players are starting to emulate the way that the AI plays. Because the AI just kicked the crap out of them all, and they were like, that's a really good strategy. And now the humans are emulating the AI. It's not the way it's supposed to go.
That's right.
AI was supposed to be the computer emulating us, but now we're learning and it's reversing the whole thing. So that could, when you expand on that, that could be interesting. Like, how does AI create music or something else like that? Hang on, that's a really interesting way to create music or art or gaming or strategy. We might turn our brains around where we start to emulate the AI.
Yeah, I mean, just look at all the deepfakes and all the stuff we look at. There was a Keanu Reeves one recently.
That's awesome.
And they also replaced Keanu Reeves with Bruce Lee. We're starting to think of new ideas for new movies. Well, this is the way to do it.
Right? Have you seen the Tom Cruise one?
Yeah, the Tom Cruise one. And it's the best way to get a paid actor who's got, similarities, able to replicate the mannerisms of Tom Cruise. Put a deepfake over it, and then
it had an impersonator, Tom Cruise impersonator, and just with a bit of the deep fake, even Tom Cruise was like, what? Because the guy had replicated his movements, the way he does things.
And then the face was just uncanny, right? You can't tell the difference anymore. This is, like you were saying, the OpenAI and Microsoft on the investment. So this comes with some strings, obviously. So OpenAI now has to use Microsoft for their cloud services as a preferred partner. And so that $1 billion investment will essentially be made back as revenue for the Azure credits, right? So it's pretty good strategy for Microsoft. And so there's a lot of criticism online to say that OpenAI is no longer open because they're no longer using AWS, who was an original investor of the institution. But at the same time, it's set up as a non-profit. It restructured to be a non-profit that owns a for-profit entity, and that for-profit entity is doing this. So that's how they justify it. But what they're also saying is that in order to keep an 8x improvement into the AGI developments, this is the only way to do it, because computation is so scarce right now, and they need the computational power of these large cloud providers. So again, we're going back to centralizing the development of AI. And I talked about in the platform wars, when you have these centralized tech companies going at it together, and also government entities going together. This will actually create a huge sort of, juxtaposition and divide in humanity. So if you combine what's happening in the platform wars with what's happening with Neuralink, eventually if we have brain-to-brain communications, we'll not be able to even understand each other if we're thinking to each other. So we won't even understand each other if we go to a foreign country speaking different languages. But if we're trying to improve communications with brain-computer interfaces, this is not going to cut it, right? Your Chinese iOS in your link, right, will not work with the English iOS.
Well, the thing is, we have all the technology, and I think Elon's primary thing is the pathway. He says that the problem is the data rate, which is our fingers and keyboards, or even voice, doesn't matter what it is. We are slow. The tech is awesome on all sides. We're the slow piece of crap in the middle. So that's what he's trying, essentially the whole purpose of that is to speed up that data rate.
That's true.
I mean, I want to sit there and do writing and editing just by looking at the screen and, you know how fast we can edit when we see it, cut and paste, change that. I just want to be able to look at the screen and just write. But it's still be writing, it's just a lot faster than these slow things.
We're limited by the digits on our hands, right? It's kind of like 5 thumbs per minute or something, 5 seconds. Or
they do voice recognition and everything's like stop, enter, full stop, correct word. Slower than your hands. I can do like 150 words a minute.
At least vision is good because you're getting, visual data, you're processing it, but then trying to, do the inputs to the computer. It's a bit slower, right?
Soon we'll have like people that look like they're, got bipolar or because they'll have the glasses on and they'll actually be shining a screen into their eyes. They'll sit there talking to themselves and we think they're going on as not really, they're actually doing work, and doing things. So it'll be kind of interesting.
Yeah, exactly.
Input devices, I think that's what everyone's focusing on, isn't it? From the phones to the neural links to the anything that speeds this up.
Yeah, everything's just becoming an optimization problem in order to cater to the customer needs.
Yeah, well, the whole point of Alexas and all these voice control thing is to help the computer understand what you want.
Yeah.
That's all it is. It's how fast can we get them what we want.
I mean, this is accelerating it, right? So all this competition, which is good, right, for a market, but when you have natural monopolies and it's concentrated around these corporations, and with the Chinese government centralizing and sharing their own organization's data, that might lead to some, developments of AI that, Elon might not have said.
Speaking of sharing data in the KGB.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, in Russia as well, right?
Do everyone remember Cablegate when it came out? WikiLeaks? Everyone know what happened the other day? The FSB formed the new KGB, 7.5 terabits of data stolen.
No state secrets.
We're just about to have the world go mad on this.
That's right. We're in desperate need of protocols and platforms that are, create that openness and also decentralized nature of it. So SingularityNet is one of the examples. So we keep talking about it. They've got their beta platform. SingularityNet is essentially an AI blockchain platform. If you've got a cool AI piece of code, you can put it on the SingularityNet and it'll use tokenomics to reward that particular AI if it's good and used in use cases, right?
Here's a biscuit.
Here's a biscuit, right? So this
the problem is like we say that the computer wants to know what we think. The problem becomes when it doesn't care what we think.
Yeah, exactly. And so, Ben Goetz is the founder of SingularityNet. It empowers Sophia, the robot. That robot that looks like Marilyn Monroe, who was based off Marilyn
without a skull.
Without a skull, with a transparent skull. You can see the chips in her head. But this powers Sophia, the robot, and it's the platform for the decentralized AI economy. And talking about centralization, right? This is Facebook Libra announced in June, but you can see that this consortium of 27 players, issued by Facebook, but essentially Facebook will have its own wallet, the Libra wallet, and that means that all these great ideas that the Bitcoin crypto community had, these are actually centralized now in the corporates and monetizing it that way. So Libra Association, based in Switzerland, it's a permission blockchain. And essentially that means that you'll make payments really easily. It's got already over 2 billion users, so it'll be quick adoption. But at the end of the day, will governments let it have sovereignty, and will allow data essentially be protected? So it's
government's working on their own.
Yeah.
So most people know we actually have the digital Australian dollar that has been shelved, just put aside. I don't know why it didn't hit the media, but if you go and look at our Federal Reserve, our Reserve Bank. The government made announcements about it. They've actually got the structure of the digital Australian dollar. They just went not quite ready and shelved it for like a couple of years. But we've built it. We've actually got that form. So if they had released it, you could be being paid in DAD, the digital Australian dollar currency, which is pegged to our currency. It's just a digital form of it.
Yeah.
So we've actually, Australia's already there.
Was there two?
what's going to be great about this is it's going to accelerate that, right? So if it's a project that's been mothballed, or at least
Well, they just got not quite
sure.
Wait, they're waiting.
Yeah, and this will accelerate it because if we were to have an AUD stablecoin, so a digital currency that's pegged to the Australian dollar, and enable people to build on top of it, kind of like with open banking, with the new payments platform, but a more crypto-based version of that. This will actually accelerate it, and it's already getting the regulators to formulate their ideas about it. Because if you're just a startup in crypto land, you would have not the sort of the power or the money to actually go through all those regulatory hurdles to actually get it out of the market. And so the crypto community is seeing this as a great opportunity for the regulations to be more clear-cut.
Well, you see, the tax office has all made their announcements about crypto. So the federal bank banking system is different to our tax system. Tax system is they're going nuts on crypto because they want to know how they get your gains and everything out of it and tax the hell out of it.
That's all they care about right now.
That's all I care about. Is getting a bit of it.
Exactly. So that was just a really high-level overview. Sorry about this. We had to go through that without much background, but we've got the real speakers here tonight. Andrew Despi. I just want to do a quick overview. So if you want to hear more about this, we've got the SingularityU Sydney chapter. There's an event coming up on the 7th of August. If you want to check out that link, it's called Designing Australia's Future of Abundance. So how do we use science and technology to create abundance for all? And it's going to be held at the Work Club at Barangaroo. And so, hope to see you there. 7th of August. And so the SU Summit in October. We'll have it on the 22nd to 23rd. The SingularityU Australia Summit is going to be held at the ICC in Sydney. We're going to be having a tech hub demo. So one of the companies that will be demoing is Inventia Life Science. So they've created a product called Rastrum that just won the Good Design Awards in Australia, 2019.
May I brag here? That's designed by Design Industry.
Fantastic. Give this man a round of applause. Hey, congratulations. As you can see, we've got some pretty talented crowd here as well, right? So this company essentially does 3D bioprinting. So for the biologists out there, the challenge they have is that when they're trying to test their drugs on, say, a tumor cell, they need to grow these in these 2D petri dishes. But real tumors in real life, they're in 3D, and they act differently in a human body. So what these 3D bioprinters do is replicate what it's like for a tumor to be in a 3D body. And therefore the drugs...
Good for bioweapon testing.
Exactly. So you can do this en masse and be able to achieve the results you need with that accuracy. We also have Tesla Suit coming along all the way from London. These guys do full body haptic suits. So kind of like the Ready Player One movies. So you can see it's a full body top and bottom. And they've got these heat packs as well. So what it's used is with VR to fully immerse you. So if you get shot by a bullet, you'll be able to feel it. If you get struck by a wind or something like that, you can feel rain in a poor environment. But most importantly, when they're focusing on B2B environments, they're looking at fire training. So if you're in the fire services, to actually have real heat gather around you, they've said that it increases the retention of training by up to 80%. So this is actually something that's used, in corporates and mining and oil and gas and defense, non-combat training and things like that. So these are sort of the real B2B uses for this now. And finally, we've got Beidou Maps. So this is essentially beacon IoT technology, helping the vision impaired to navigate large places, such as the ICC. So they're going to set up these beacons and create these apps that helps vision impaired people navigate throughout the entire venue. Yeah. Great. So I'd like to put your hands together for Andrew Despi. Andrew Despi is from Akin AI. He's going to be talking about soft transhumanism, kinder, gentler future. Yeah. I always do this to people. I always make people clap, and then they come on and I have to plug in the laptop. So awkward.
It's okay. You can clap twice.
You can clap again, right later. But just a bit of background. So Andrew used to work at CBA in emerging technology field. No good. No good. And now he's working over at Akin with one of the ex-IBM Watson team members. And you guys are trying to develop a good wellness personal chatbot. Is that right?
More or less.
Well, let's another round of applause for Andrew Despi, please.
That's a really, really annoying Twitter handle.
Yeah, the underscores. Yeah.
But it's memorable.
You can just search my name. I don't know why I even bothered with the Twitter handle. Thanks very much for having me, everyone. Can everyone hear me okay? Yeah? Everyone online, can you hear me okay? Oh, I can't hear you, so it's okay. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that we gathered on today, the Gadigal people whose land we're occupying. And I'd also like to acknowledge the one very young person in the audience, who's on his phone right now, so that's okay. Hey mate, there's one actual really young person in the audience, and I think that's really awesome because all the things that we're talking about here matter a lot to the future generation. So I'm very grateful that we're graced with his presence. So I don't know what you guys are expecting from this. It's going to be pretty philosophical. You might find it really boring, so I apologize in advance. Basically, I've spent the last year or so thinking semi-deeply about transhumanism and kind of coming up with my own take on what I think transhumanism is and or should be. And the conclusion that I came to was that it's very different to what the mainstream refers to as transhumanism, and so that's why I'm calling it soft transhumanism. I'm not an academic, although to be fair, transhumanism isn't really an academic discipline yet anyway, but there are a lot of things in academia that are relevant to transhumanism, for example, ethics, technology, culture, and so on. So I've come up with my own theory. This is the first time I've spoken publicly about it, so I'm using this talk as an opportunity to try and actually structure my various thoughts that I've had over the last year, and you guys are my guinea pigs. And if at the end of this talk there's just blank faces, that's okay. I'm almost expecting that. If at the end of the talk there's a lot of debate and argument and kind of passion, I'd be very excited about that. I would love your feedback, and I would love for you guys to challenge me on some of the assumptions that I've got. So without further ado, I'll go straight into it. So very timely, perfect. I didn't know that Neuralink would be one of the topics for this event tonight, so I'm very proud that I managed to tap into the zeitgeist and pick this as the first example to speak about. So as has been discussed already, the Neuralink recruitment video was released a few days ago. Elon Musk and his team spoke about what they've been working on for the last 2 years, and I think Neuralink is a perfect, if not the ultimate example of what I would call hard transhumanism. And you can see, there's a chip, there's threads that go into your brain that physically connect your biological body to digital technology and integrate your brain and your mind to the rest of the digital world. And some of the words that Mr. Musk used in his presentation were things like, we want to achieve symbiosis with AI, which is interesting. He also says we want to have the option of merging with AI, which is very interesting, because if you think about any kind of technology, think about smartphones as an example. When they first came out, they were definitely an option, but they're definitely not an option anymore. You can't really get by without a smartphone. We've been conditioned to need a smartphone. So he might say that Neuralink is giving us the option of merging with AI, but we all know that what this is going towards is forcing us all to merge with AI. And that's okay. I'm not going to say that that's bad or good. Just want to call out that it's not an option. And finally, he talks about the whole point of Neuralink as being creating a third layer in our brains. So you've got the limbic system, you've got the cortex, and he wants to create a third layer that is a digital layer. And he says that the problem is bandwidth. And I guess kind of the whole point of my talk today is to say that that's not a real problem. that's not an actual problem. That's a technical problem. That's not a real problem, right? Real problems are hunger, poverty, those are actual problems, right? Bandwidth is just purely a technical problem. So I hope that this gives you a good kind of sense of where I'm going with this. But I'm going to take a step back before we do that. So first of all, when you think of the word technology, which is what transhumanism is about, right? It's about humans merging with technology. When you think about the word technology, I did a Google search of images that come up when you search for technology, just to illustrate my point. These are the sort of things you get. I love stock images, by the way, so this is, apparently this is technology. Apparently this is technology. This is my absolute favorite. This is the best stock image ever made. This is what AI is, right? It's like robots in a call center using laptops. But what I'm trying to say here is that somehow in the last 20 years, and it's probably about 20 years, the word technology has been hijacked to mean digital technology. And if you Google the word technology, you can go deep, like who knows how many pages until you reach anything to do with non-digital technology, right? And language is important because language affects the way that we think and the way that we behave. So at some point this became technology. Now, I'm sure if I show you these images, you won't disagree that this is technology, right? So the wheel, everybody agrees that's technology, right? We don't really talk about the wheel anymore, but it's pretty cool and useful. Doors are very interesting kind of technology, right? They keep people out, but allow you to also come in and out. You know, if you've got a key, which is a separate but related kind of technology. And the thing that I think really attracts people to technology is the fact that it's deterministic. It's predictable, right? Determinism means that if you do this, then this will happen. And if you do this 1,000,000 times, this will happen. Unless you're bad at coding, in which case you got something wrong. But ultimately, the beauty of it is that it's predictable and we can just get it to do what we want it to do. That's the beauty of technology, right? If you kind of broaden your scope and open your minds a little bit, there's actually a lot more to technology, and you're going to have to stretch the definition of the word. Which is something that I like to do because I think by stretching the definition of the word, you get a deeper understanding of the world and how we interact with it. So, one kind of technology is chemicals. We enhance ourselves with chemicals. So if you're sick and you're taking medication, right, that's definitely a kind of technology. It's a human artifact. It's been developed for a particular purpose and it enhances you, right? Psychedelics are definitely a kind of technology. They've been used by people for as long as we can go back in time. There's some speculative stuff about psychedelics' relationship with the way that we've developed language. We know that animals use psychedelics in the wild. There's lots of very interesting documented evidence of that. But really what they do is they're a kind of technology that changes the way that our brain works, that changes the way that we synthesize the world, that has helped us to better understand the world, and sometimes to understand the world in a way that isn't necessarily right. But it's played a very beneficial role for society, up until the last couple of thousand years when we've moved into a kind of industrialized agricultural civilization where we try to suppress this type of thinking. The most powerful technology ever invented is language. So again, if you disagree that language is a technology, please raise your hand at the end and then we can have a chat about it. But this is Wait But Why was mentioned earlier. This is also from Wait But Why, great blog. But this kind of shows how knowledge passes through generations with and without advanced language. Obviously, language itself exists in the broader world. We know that other apes have got forms of language. We know that Animals communicate non-verbally, we know that plants communicate chemically and so on, but advanced human language that kind of sprung up about 100,000 years ago is really what spurred us as Homo sapiens into what we are today. And if you go down that path, there is a crap load of technologies that we don't really think of technologies, but they are incredibly impactful to our lives. And those technologies are stories, they are ideas, and they're metaphors. Metaphors are incredibly powerful technologies. They're super beneficial if you're trying to understand something that's complex, which is the whole world, and we're trying to figure out the world that we live in. We can only understand it through metaphors and through analogies. So whoever came up with the first analogy is a genius. And it's a shame we don't know the name of that person, but probably more influential than Einstein or Newton, let's face it. Stories are really, really powerful technologies because they help us make sense of the world, which has a survival benefit. Being able to live together in a group and have shared stories helps us survive better. And there's very specific kinds of stories that have more impact than others, and various ideas that have more impact than others. And people die for ideas. People kill for ideas, right? And we can talk about that a little bit more, but if you look at communism is a great example, if you look at capitalism is another example, if you look at democracy is another example, people die and kill for these ideas. But probably something that is really important to keep track of through this talk is the idea of memes. And that's why I put that meme of Keanu Reeves. Again, who knew that we'd be talking about Keanu Reeves? It's amazing. But we're all familiar with internet memes, but that word comes from the 70s, from Richard Dawkins, from The Selfish Gene, where he came up with this concept of memes as something that's analogous to genes, as something that is an idea that is passed from person to person, that spreads and that evolves. And some memes, some ideas, some things spread more than others. We don't know why. It's got to do with psychology, it's got to do with culture. Culture is really just a collection of memes that we share, right? And basically language is an example of memes, and technology is an example of memes. So memes really are important to understand because we need to figure out why am I sharing this with other people? Why do I find this funny? Why do I think that everyone else should hear about this? Why do I really like this word? Why do I keep using this word? Well, it's probably got to do with something like, this person that I really respect or look up to really likes this word and I want to be like that person. Why do I really like this idea? Why? That's a really important thing to consider when we think about technology. So, okay. All right. This is going to go a little bit deep, but I want you guys to think about when you think of the idea of you, what do you think you are? Like, what is your concept of yourself? Because everybody's got a very different take on this, right? So hands up if you think that you are a body with a brain. Yeah? Hands up if you think that you're like a point of view that's somewhere behind where your eyes physically are, but you're like disembodied, you're just like this point of view.
Like a vessel?
Yeah?
Yeah.
Embodied subjectivity.
Okay. And at what point do you stop and the rest of the universe start? Is it just basically your physical body? Is that how you define who you are? Like basically, I've got these legs and stuff, and yeah. Your clothes, are your clothes part of you? Yeah. Yeah, they are a part of you. She says no. Interesting. Okay. And so how many of you guys are familiar with this whole concept that all of the cells in our body are constantly regenerating? And yep. So if you go back to like when you're 3 years old, there's like not a single cell in your body that's common. So is your 3-year-old self you? Yes? No.
It's an inner child.
It's funny, like, I don't think anyone can agree on who you are, right? But I think what we can all agree on is that we need a boundary, and we all kind of have to define a boundary, and a lot of the time that boundary is determined by the culture that we're brought up in. Different cultures have got very different takes on the nature of identity. And different cultures think about identity as being more transcendental, right? So if we, I'm not practicing Hindu or Hindus or anything like that, but the distinction between self and the universe is very different in different cultures. And what I'm trying to say here is that if you think about all of the ideas that are in your head, they didn't come from you, did they? Somebody put them in there. And yet those ideas shape your identity. And that's really important because that applies to your technology as well. So if you've got a smartphone in the US that's legally a part of you, there's been court cases where that's been determined that your smartphone is a legal extension of you. And when you get to the point where you're dependent on a piece of technology, it's really important to be aware of that because a lot of the time we're not. So if an algorithm is telling you what you should watch next, is that algorithm a part of you? Most of us would say, no way, but if you're just letting it tell you what to watch next and you just watch what it tells you to watch next, isn't it a part of you? So, okay, this is where it gets a little bit theoretical, but I want to go through this because I only recently, as I said, in the last year, started to learn about this stuff. I came across this recently, and I think that most people in the technology community aren't aware of this concept. It's very common and popular in the social sciences. It's the idea of affordances. And it's a theory that's only just being properly developed, and how it ties in with technology and with culture and with the world around us is still being worked out. So, as I said, I'm kind of brainstorming this as we go along. But there's kind of 6 key types of affordances that have been agreed on in the literature. One, and the way to conceptualize it, right, is think about any kind of object, right, whether it's a piece of technology or the environment around you or an idea, an abstract object, and then think about these affordances, right? So an affordance can request something from you. So if you're driving down the road and you see a speed bump, it's requesting that you slow down. It doesn't mean that you can't just drive at the same speed, but it is requesting something of you. It's not a human being, remember, it's an abstract object, but it's requesting something of you. An object can demand something from you. For example, if you're filling out a form and it's demanding to know whether you're male or female, you can't go past that point in the form, it's demanding. It can also encourage you to do things. Again, it's a kind of human concept, but it's embodied in objects, both physical and abstract. So if you get a large plate, it's encouraging you to eat more at a buffet. Things can discourage you from doing things, and the example I always give is the character limit on Twitter, or even just Facebook itself. If you ever used to use bulletin boards, like web forums, people used to have really deep and detailed discussions and arguments about things. Then all those things slowly moved to Facebook, and now everything's been reduced to a like or to a brief comment, and you no longer have those deep discussions on the internet. An object can refuse something, so the stairs here definitely would refuse you to enter this building if you're disabled and in a wheelchair. And they can allow things. So a credit card can allow you to buy things that you can't afford. And if you don't have a credit card, you're not allowed to do that, right? So I want you to keep these concepts in mind as you think about technology and how it's impacting you, and where we're going with the future of technology and how we're merging with it. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about AI, because I assume you guys already know a fair bit about AI. You're at a transhumanism meetup. And also, I'm not an expert, so I would be speaking out of class. But this is a really good model for thinking about AI. If you want to look it up and read about it some more, there's a guy called Marcus Hutter, who is from ANU. His PhD, he wrote this with his PhD student Shane Legg, who's one of the co-founders of DeepMind. This is a really beautiful, simple model to think about AI, where you've got an agent, and you can, this can be any kind of intelligence. That agent could be a human, and you've got the environment that that agent is in. And as the agent is doing things, it's getting feedback from the environment and a reward if it's doing the right thing. And that's what enables this optimization loop. And this loop, this feedback loop, is at the core of cybernetics, which is an idea that spawned AI to begin with, but has sort of become less popular over the last few decades. But cybernetics is incredibly powerful because it's not just about AI, it's not just about technology. It's the way that a basic cell is able to exist in the world because it senses its environment, it's able to take an input, and it's able to adjust in order to be able to survive. It's at the core of life itself, and this concept applies to AI and has been applied to AI. If you think about your brain, and again, you, right? Your thoughts, you want to move your hand to the right, and so you kind of send this signal to your hand, and then you get a visual feedback that it's moved to the right, and that goes back, and that's how you function. And if you don't have that visual feedback, if you ever try to like stand on one leg with your eyes closed, you know what I'm talking about. It's very hard to do things. That feedback loop is the center of intelligence. And again, this is something that you guys are probably familiar with, which is Nick Bostrom's theory of superintelligence and the intelligence explosion. But the question is kind of what happens when this kind of optimization algorithm gets so good and so good and so good and so good that it gets better and better in an exponential kind of way at doing things, just being generally intelligent. And the key problem that we're trying to solve is if that takeoff duration is just a few days or a few weeks, do we actually have enough time as a civilization, as a species, to be able to properly protect ourselves and control this AI as it's exploding? And the most common thought experiment that's given with this whole problem of superintelligence is like if you build an algorithm that can improve itself, right, and it can improve itself really, really fast at doing a particular thing, and it's generally intelligent, so it can improve itself at being intelligent. How can we, and you just, you build it and you just let it go, right? How can we be sure that it's going to do the things that we designed it to do, that we want it to do? This is the alignment problem, right? And again, this is a technical problem. Not a human problem, it's a technical problem. Most of the debate is about how do we solve this technical challenge. And it's a valid debate, but it's got real-world implications. And the real-world implication is that if we give any algorithm a particular goal, it can't exist in isolation from the rest of the world and the complexity of the world. You can't just say, do this, without it being aware of the fact that humans are valuable, that human life is valued, that all these other things, right? And the most common thought experiment that's used to illustrate this point is the idea of the artificial general intelligence that is designed to amass a collection of paper clips. Yeah? So this guy, everybody knows this guy. So we built an artificial general intelligence, and we tell it we want you to amass as many paper clips as possible. And so it starts hoarding paper clips. It figures out, because it's an artificial general intelligence, it improves itself to the point where it can actually order and buy paper clips. It then figures out that it's already bought all the paper clips in the world, and so it starts manufacturing paper clips. And after a while, it kind of starts mining resources and taking over more and more resources and just turning the whole world into paper clips. And then it'll go to the space, it'll figure out how to go to space and just turn the whole solar system into paper clips. This is kind of what the problem is of giving an algorithm a goal, right? And this is one of the key problems with superintelligence. Nobody wants a world of clippies. But what it comes down to is that, again, the real problem isn't the technical problem. It's what are we actually trying to use AI to do and why? Why are we building AI? Why are we merging with AI? Why are we using augmented reality? Why are we using blockchain? The technology is cool in and of itself, I agree. But what is the actual problem we're trying to solve? And the problem everybody's trying to solve is how to make money. That's the problem that all the technology in the world right now is assigned to. How can we make money? And this isn't coming from a anarchist or whatever. If you read the world's leading economists, they talk about the fact that the entire global economy is driven towards technological progress, because technological progress leads to more wealth. More wealth can be invested in technological progress, and that's the real symbiosis here. It's not between humans and AI, it's between technology and capitalism. That's the cycle that just keeps accelerating at a human cost, because it's not actually solving real problems, right? I mean, okay, you can talk about how global poverty levels have the whole sea is rising, so even though there's more inequality, the poor people can now, in other parts of the world can now eat safely and whatever. But inequality is rising at a faster rate than ever in history. And what's going to happen is that the wealthiest people and corporations will be the ones that have access to the best and most powerful technology. And that gap will only increase. And so this is the problem. This is the actual problem. It's not bandwidth, it's capitalism. Until somebody fixes this, it doesn't matter that Elon Musk is building Neuralink. It doesn't matter that we go to Mars. If we have people in the world's richest country, millions of people who live on the street, what is the point in this world, right? So now let's come back to this whole concept of transhumanism. There's a really powerful quote by a media theorist from the 60s called Marshall McLuhan, who said that with our extensions come amputations. And so transhumanism is all about human enhancement, but what are we losing in the process, right? So let's think about transhumanism. So I've got, again, as I said, I've got my own theory of transhumanism, and again, you can all disagree, but I'm here to tell you about my view. So, what can anyone make any sense of a bird that doesn't have a nest, right? It just wouldn't be able to survive, reproduce. The bird is inextricably linked with the nest. The nest is a part of the bird. It's just an extension of the bird. Just because it's not a biological artifact doesn't mean it's not part of the bird, right? What is a termite without its mound? Nothing. Cannot survive. Cannot survive. What's a termite without its colony? That's a really interesting one, right? Take a human, put them in complete isolation without all of the knowledge and all of the help from the rest of society, and see how likely they are to survive. But this is kind of really interesting. And this is, and if you're interested in this similarity, I highly recommend checking out Daniel Dennett. He's like my favorite living philosopher. And this goes back to that whole idea of memes that I was talking about earlier. Because there's a kind of convergent evolution, if you look at it superficially, between ants, the termites and humans. Like the Sagrada Familia, one of the most beautiful human artifacts in the world, looks eerily similar. Even on the inside, even in terms of its function and the way it's designed to circulate air and so on, as termites. But termites have no idea that what they're doing is building a mound. They don't have any conceptualization whatsoever of Earth. They don't have words, right? And yet they spread this collaboration in order to achieve this outcome. And so, if you go back all the way to Homo erectus, humans have coexisted and co-evolved with technology. So we are only here today because a couple million years ago somebody figured out how to controllably make fire. We are only here today because about 500,000 years ago, somebody figured out how to use fire to cook food, which meant that we could store food. It meant that we could live in all kinds of places on the planet that we wouldn't be able to do before, which meant that when disasters happen, we can actually survive. And so when you think about a human, you can't separate the human from the technology. We've always been transhuman. To be human is to be transhuman. And that's what this path that we're going on today with digital technology is, just a continuation of this thing that's been happening for literally millions of years. Now, when it comes to transhumanism, my favorite transhuman person on the planet, and I can say this safely because Meow isn't here tonight, is Chris Dancy. And he's a real inspiration. He's inspired me a lot. So his personal story is that, this is about 2015. In 2012, he was morbidly obese, ate junk food, did drugs and alcohol, and just had a horrible lifestyle, and was in a really bad place, but he was a bit of a geek. And so he started quantifying himself and started tracking data about his behavior and about his physical state. And bit by bit, he kept adding more and more sensors to the point where he became world-renowned for being the world's most connected man. He had up to 200 systems monitoring every aspect of his life. And I'm talking about every aspect, right? Not just where he is and what his heart rate is and that sort of thing, but going really deep. He had his calendar broken down into like 2-minute chunks, and he was tracking everything manually. He got sensors that were measuring the decibel level where he was, because what he realized was that he was raising his voice a lot. And so he was using it when he was at home. He had a sensor that was measuring the decibel level, and if he raised his voice above a certain level, the lights in his house would dim. And that would give him the feedback loop to learn to change his behavior in order to bring his voice down and be more calm, right? He also realized that there was a correlation between his level of stress and the light level in the room. And so he was measuring the amount of light. Now, there's all kinds of other things that he was measuring. But the thing that's really interesting is that today, he no longer wears any wearables. He still does really interesting things, like if you have a coffee with him, he'll put his phone down with the face down, and then if he starts talking, he'll turn around, and he'll keep switching it around. And so he's using the accelerometers on his phone to measure, to keep track of what proportion of his time he's talking versus listening, because he's still getting feedback on that. But the really interesting thing is that he doesn't have these sensors anymore, but he can tell you, if you're in a room together, he can tell you to a pretty good level of approximation what the decibel level is in the room anymore. He had these sensors attached to him that were giving him feedback, and now he no longer needs these sensors. Think about how beautiful that is. Rather than creating this future where we are completely dependent on technology, why not use technology to give ourselves superpowers and then get rid of it and keep those superpowers? Isn't that way more humanizing? And in the middle there's a reference to a podcast and a book by a guy called Doug Rushkoff that I also highly recommend listening to and reading. It's called Team Human. Doug Rushkoff wrote a book a long time ago called Present Shock. He's a very famous sort of theorist on technology and humanity. And he went from being a futurist to going much deeper into how can we connect with each other as human beings more, rather than looking at technology to solve problems. So I highly recommend checking that out. So we've come to the kind of crux of it. As I said, this is a poorly thought out and developed and not tested at all theory yet. And you guys are the first test for this theory. And I've tried to keep it succinct. So what I kind of classify as soft transhumanism, this is kind of my how I try to break this down. So first of all, transhumanism is about human enhancement, right? Well, my claim is that humans are enhanced by an ecology of soft and hard technologies. We are enhanced by an ecology, which means a whole bunch of interacting with each other and with us, soft, and hard technologies, ideas, languages, concepts, stories, phones, wearables, clothes, buildings, etc. We're enhanced by this whole thing. We choose our ecology and contribute to the development of technologies. So if you use a piece of technology, by virtue of the fact that you're using it, you're contributing to its development. If you buy something, that thing is more likely to be created again, right, and to be spread more, right? So even just by using technology, you're contributing to its development. By not using a technology, you're also contributing to its development. So Clippy is a great example of all of us choosing to shut Clippy the hell up led to a new generation of digital systems that are nowhere near as dumb and annoying. And finally, and this point I'm struggling with because I tried to keep it succinct, but as I wrote it, I realized that there's so much more to it. Technologies should maximize human agency and well-being. What I mean by agency, I mean that technology should actually empower humans. It shouldn't just be designed to take away all of our decisions necessarily without actually telling us why it's doing things. And it should also be educating us and making us stronger rather than just becoming something to outsource to. But as well as environmental health. And the reason why I put that in is because the whole enlightenment that we're still living in, which we still haven't properly as a civilization figured out, we're still debating whether humanism is worthwhile and Christianity is good and all this sort of stuff. But if you're kind of at the level where you think the Enlightenment's great, science is great, rational thought is great, well, that all led to the Industrial Revolution that is completely annihilating the planet and leading to the displacement of hundreds of millions of people because of climate change and the extinction of half of terrestrial animals in the last 100 years. If you think that's good, that's great. I don't think it's good. So we need technology to both improve the human condition, but not do it at the cost of, and not even not do it at the cost of, but do it in a way that also improves the health of the planet. It's not enough to be sustainable. We need to actually fix the planet as well as humans. So that's kind of the idea is we need to consider technology beyond just digital technology and think about this whole ecology of ideas. And there is an ethical element to this, which is that there needs to be an important reason, an important problem to solve for why we're building technology, and it's not capitalism. So that's kind of transhumanism. Now, as a way to kind of think about this is Wim Hof, if you guys aren't familiar with him. He's really fascinating because he doesn't use any technology whatsoever, but he uses ideas and ways of thinking as a kind of technology in order to use his brain, which is still the most powerful technology in the universe that we're aware of, that we seem so intent on ignoring. He uses his brain to do really amazing things, and for that reason he's an inspiration. Okay. Now, as an encore, I'll tell you guys a little bit about the company that I work for and how this is or is not relevant to what we're doing. So, we're called Akin. We're an artificial intelligence company based out of San Francisco and Sydney. Most of our team is here. We're working with researchers at UNSW and ANU and all kinds of awesome, interesting organizations. And what we want to build is personal AI. So we're trying to create a new category of AI that we're calling personal AI. And the idea is to go from, if you think about Alexa as this one to infinite platform that is designed to just sell you as much stuff as possible. I think it was Keith that said that Alexa is really good at understanding what you want. That's what it's optimized for, understanding what you want. Well, it's really important to know what people need as well, and Alexa doesn't really give a shit about that. So we're trying to kind of rebuild that whole concept from the bottom up by putting humans at the center of how they interact with businesses around them and understanding people's needs and their goals and helping them achieve that. We've got a thesis on the future, which is that AI is getting so good that it'll be able to solve more and more complex problems. We'll hand over our day-to-day decisions to AI, and as I said, you know, there's plenty of examples with Netflix and so on where we are handing over decisions to AI, whether we realize it or not. And we will merge with personal AI. It will become a part of us. So if this is what's happening, then we want to be on the side of good and figure out a way to do it in a way that improves the human condition. So we're building helpers, which is just a cuter way of saying assistants, but assistants that actually understand your personality, your needs, your goals, and help you organize your life. We're building companions that can follow you around and truly, deeply understand you, that you can have a relationship with, obviously not a human relationship, but companions that you can actually trust. And most importantly, we want to build coaches. And so we want to not only be able to help people achieve their goals, but actually get them to question what their goals are and why they want to do the things that they want to do in life. So that is the end of my presentation. Thank you.
When you were talking about kind of transhumanism, you were very much focused on kind of transhumanism aspect, which linked really implicitly with like technology and things like that. But when you were kind of talking about that trans element, did that to you mean, because to me that means crossing over in some way, it's going from one boundary to another, the trans aspect of it. So to me, transhumanism means I'm crossing over from something that I built, from something that I am to something that I built as well. I guess the question is the humanism aspect in your soft transhumanism argument, is that what controls the technology aspect, or is it the trans element, I guess?
So there's a concept of post-humanism, there's hyper-humanism, there's all kinds of words that are being used now, so very much depends on where you want to go with that. My take on it is that I just wanted to focus on the concept of human enhancement, which is what the most common definition of transhumanism is. Human enhancement using science and technology, that's the kind of standard definition. And what I wanted to argue is that technology, that bit of technology, people are narrowing down on just one tiny aspect of it. And if we actually open our minds to what technology truly is, there's a much broader way that we can enhance humanity and the human condition. So it's not so much about it is all about humanism. But I also was careful to say at the end that humanism itself is broken and that philosophy has moved on a lot from the Enlightenment, and that you can't just optimize for the human condition at the expense of the environment and so on. So I don't know if that answers your question.
First of all, thank you for being able to separate the technological problem from the human problem. And I think you're on the right track. I think you should be careful not to let politics and academia hijack your vehicle. And the reason why I say that is I think it has to be the human society agenda rather than an institutional agenda. I think I just like to say it, I think you're on the right track.
Thanks very much. Yeah. I will take one more question. Or we'll get another speaker. Yep.
I have two small questions. Oh, thank you.
Hello.
So I have two small questions. One is, which animals are the most criminal when it comes to psychedelics?
Sorry, can you say that again?
Which animals take the most drugs and why? And also my second question is, so with capitalism, how are we going to destroy that without an enterprise Robin Hood?
Which animals take the most drugs? I mean, there's like really scant evidence across the animal world. I mean, everybody knows about catnip. I mean, that's a pretty common one.
What about the dogs that lick the back of the cane toads?
Yeah, there's that. Dogs lick the back of the cane toads. Deer love psychedelic mushrooms. I don't know if you've ever seen that. There's really famous, like, awesome videos of monkeys finding fermented fruit and stealing alcohol off people in Gibraltar and stuff and getting wasted. So it's all over the animal kingdom. And your other question was, can we do this without an enterprise Robin Hood?
Yeah.
The enterprise Robin Hood. When I say capitalism is a problem, I want to be specific. It's public companies. It's the stock market that demands short-term capital gains. That's the biggest problem. Once companies become public, they become embroiled in this cycle of just creating shareholder value rather than having some other purpose. So there's definitely no reason why a private company can't be the enterprise Robin Hood, but there is still an underlying problem with the whole value system that drives this growth that we need to figure out, and just figure out a better way of measuring value and agreeing on other ways of measuring value.
But it would be too slow is what I'm getting at.
It would be too slow. I mean, there's also a lot of waste in the way that corporations work because they hold all their IP, they don't share, it's all about protecting stuff. So there's definitely more efficient ways as well of doing things. So if you want my answer, like my utopia is distributed organizations that I think that when a lot of those kind of technical challenges with DAOs get solved, that to me is the future of human enterprise.
Thanks.
Thanks very much. Thanks everyone.
So next up, we've got someone at the door. Hey, what happened to that gym? I don't think they needed to press the bell. It's open already.
Doors open. How? We don't even have human intelligence sometimes.
They're waiting outside. So, please give a round of applause for Cregan. Talking about ethics and explainability in AI.
Thank you very much. So yeah, hi everyone, my name is Anne. I work for a company called Surround Australia, but I've only worked there for a couple of months. So most of what I'm going to present is my own opinion, my own views, my own work, but I'll cover a little bit of Surround at the end because Surround are leaders in explainable AI. So just to get started, who's concerned about ethics in AI? Can I have a show of hands? Okay, most people are, not everyone, but most people are concerned. Who knows what explainable AI is?
Probably the footage.
Not
Can't
yet.
say as well.
My friend does. Probably because he knows me. Okay, so we're going to talk about ethics in AI, which leads, which follows on quite well from what previous speakers have been saying, and then we're going to get specifically to the concept of explainability and why that's important. So I'm going to start with a couple of recent case studies about computers and whether we can trust them, consider the question of whether robots are our friends, and then we'll look at the need for ethics for decision making in AI. We'll do some comparison of the machine learning approach in AI, which is what most AI is currently based on. Compare it with the semantic approach, which is what my personal background is, and look at explainable AI in those two approaches. And lastly, just talk a little bit about Surround. So, can we trust computers? How many people here trust computers? Do you trust your computer? Bad idea. Okay. So here's a story from a year or two ago. The computer fired me. There was this fellow called Ibrahim. He was on a 3-year contract. He was 8 months into it. And because of a minor technicality with changing to a new computer system and his contract not getting moved over, he experienced all these things. There was a termination email to his recruiter. His key card access to the building was cancelled. He couldn't get into the car park. He couldn't access Jira or his other software. His account was disabled. and eventually security came to escort him from the building. Now the irony of all this is no human being actually wanted to fire Ibrahim. The computer decided to fire him because he didn't have a valid contract in the system. And once the order was put in, the system for employee termination, each event triggered the next event, just like a chain of dominoes, and there was no opportunity for any human being to intervene in that process. And various people, his manager and various other people, tried to intervene and stop this process, and they actually could not stop the process. And it took 3 weeks until things were sorted out. Eventually, he had to be reinstated as a new employee with a new employee number. That was the only thing that they could do. Now, in this situation, okay, that's very inconvenient. But imagine if that computer was responsible for a life support system. Imagine if that computer was wetware, which was connected to your body, and it started doing something like that. It decided that you were dead and it didn't need to support you anymore, and it just started shutting down. What would you do? So we need to have fail-safes in our systems against these kind of things. We need to think this through. Here's another reason why you shouldn't trust your computer. Here's a Google Photos classification task. Can anyone see anything wrong with this picture? Anything wrong with those classifications that Google Photos has come up with?
Gorillas.
Do those look like gorillas to you? Well, they looked like gorillas to the machine learning algorithm. And if you ask the machine learning algorithm why it thought that, it can't tell you. It's a black box. But obviously, this is something that we don't want it to do. The thing is, machine learning and computer algorithms will do stuff like this unless we specifically tell them not to do it. We need to make it explicit. Yeah, so we start to bring in ethics here. Obviously, there's bias. This is an evil thing to do, but the computer doesn't know what's good or evil unless we tell it. Okay, so last year, I went to a debate organised by the University of Sydney outside the square, by the philosophy department. And it was Are Robots Our Friends? And it was an interesting debate that went for a couple of hours, considering the pros and cons of whether robots are our friends. And at the end of the debate, I went to the host and I said, look, I come from a software engineering background, and in my view, this shouldn't really be a debate. I think this is a user requirement. I think what we need is engineering specs to make sure that robots are our friends. And she looked at me as though I was completely mad, which, maybe I am. But I come from a background of engineering, and I've worn a lot of hats in my life, but one of them is business analyst. And if you've ever been a business analyst, the first thing you do is find out what are the user requirements for the system that you're building. However, has anyone ever done this on a large scale for AI? No one's ever done this on a society level scale, which is what needs to be done. But the thing is, people have been coding and producing stuff, and it's out there like driverless cars, and we haven't done this yet. So machines are already making decisions and recommendations that affect our lives, and I've stolen this from the Surround Information Memorandum. We're looking for funding at the moment. These are all the areas where AI is active. AI is active even in your toothbrush. If you want to go and get an Oral-B Genius X, you can have AI in your toothbrush. So it's pervasive. It's everywhere. But can we trust it? Is it making the right decisions? What are the ethics that it's using? Is there any agreement at a social level about what the ethics should be? So being the good business analyst that I am, I started writing up some user requirements for the ethics. A bit of a grand plan. But I wrote some up. I was inspired by Isaac Asimov with his 3 laws of robotics, which I think a lot of you will be familiar with. And I wrote 3 pages worth of principles for automated decision making and action. And I've got it on my LinkedIn page. It's a post on LinkedIn. And it's version 1.0. It was just meant to be, got to start somewhere. Let's start talking about it. Someone's got to do it. So if we look at something specific, like driverless cars, it makes it very tangible, very palpable. Driverless cars make life and death decisions. So if you've been following, driverless cars and AI and ethics, you probably know the scenarios around a driverless car is going to have an accident and it has, 2 or 3 choices. Let's say it has 3 choices and none of them are good. And it has to decide which one is the least worst one. So let's say it can either knock over an old lady with a shopping cart, run into a school bus of school children, or go over a cliff with the driver and the driver dies. All right, so what do we choose? What do we choose? Now, of course, a lot of this depends. Are you the driver of the car? Is your child on the school bus? Are you the old lady? Who gets to make the decision? So this is a really important question that we need to discuss. Should the owner get to make the decision about what the car will do in such a situation? And most of the time, if you ask people, they will say if they're the owner, then going over the cliff is not the option that they want. They want to preserve their own life. Is it the manufacturer of the car that should determine it? In which case they'll be, who knows what their motivation will be, but capitalism will certainly come into play. And we heard a lot about that from the last speaker. And that's not always, generally not in our interests as a society. Should it be the government who are responsible for enacting laws? Should it be someone else, some kind of special body that does ethics for AI? I don't know. Think about it. We don't really have a good answer at the moment, but I think it needs to be done at the level of society. So let's think for a moment about the ethics for decision making. Okay, so how would we do it? How would we go about it? What we're seeking, I think, is some kind of utility maximisation function. Something along the lines of the greatest good for all concerned. That's at a social level I'm talking about. Everyone's got their own self-interest, but if you go to a social level and discuss it, then what we want is some kind of principle like that. Of course, we have to talk about how we're going to get beyond self-interest, company interest, other interests to get to that level as a start. But assuming that we even get to that we agree on that, we need to define good and greatest good, and we need to be sure to include everyone that's concerned. And then we need to know, okay, what's good for each individual person, because it's not the same for everyone. Different people have different utility functions. And then when different parties have different interests, how are we going to do the trade-off? How are we going to trade them off against each other? And then, of course, there's things like the laws of the area. We have to make sure that we don't break any laws. And then there might be some overriding conditions, like certain things that we ethically would never do under any circumstances, so we have to exclude them. Okay, so that's just a starting list. Now, that's not too hard, is it? So, there are people that are addressing these questions. There's 2 Australian efforts that have just recently started. There's the Gradient Institute, which is looking at the science of ethical AI, and my former colleague Tiberio Gitano is the chief scientist there. And there's also an effort out of the Australian National University, which is shortly to launch, called Humanising Machine Intelligence. And they're looking at what is the science of ethics, what is the mathematics of morality, how do you enact this stuff, how do you encode it. So the kind of thing that the ANU people are doing, this is a paper by Menon and Williamson looking at the trade-off between accuracy and fairness in machine learning. So if you have a machine learning algorithm determining who should and shouldn't get a home loan or a personal loan, and it turns out to be discriminating against certain groups, let's say Black Americans, it may or may not be biased. It may be that it just is more accurate that way. But we want to have some kind of measure of fairness that we include in consideration. So this paper looks at, okay, how do you trade off between fairness and accuracy? That's for machine learning. And machine learning is a black box, which means you put stuff in, you get stuff out. You don't really know what's happening in the middle. It gives you an output that is predictive. It's accurate. Like, it will accurately tell you who should and shouldn't get a loan, but it won't be able to tell you why. And if you look inside the box, there can be all sorts of different things, neural nets, deep learning, hidden layers, which I won't go into because this is not a technical talk. And there has been some effort lately on explainability methods for machine learning, because this has been identified as a real problem. It's a black box, it's producing outputs, things are happening in the real world based on those recommendations, but there's no justification why it was a recommendation. Why is it a good idea? Why did the algorithm make that prediction? So there's things you can do. There's a method called LIME, which has been invented recently, which lets you tweak the input values and see what happens with the output values. So you're kind of backwards engineering what's going on to work out which features were important for the prediction. And that works quite well. However, there's another approach that I want to talk about, which is my personal background. I have a PhD in semantic technologies. So whereas machine learning is probabilistic and opaque, semantics is kind of the opposite. It's the symbolic approach. You write formulas, you write logic formulas, and you do deductive reasoning. And so when you have a conclusion, it's like in mathematics when you have a proof. You know all the premises, you know what the chain of reasoning is, you can show how you got to your conclusions, and you can be 100% confident. So I believe it's a better approach for explainable AI than what the machine learning explainable AI is. Just some basics of the semantic approach in case you're not familiar with it, because it has been rather niche and not many people know about it. It's based on RDF, which is the Resource Description Framework, which allows you to create triples, which are subject, predicate, object. Felix is a cat, that kind of thing. Each node is a URI, so it's got a unique identifier. And then you can start interlinking your triples based on common URIs. On top of the resource description framework, you've got a querying language called Sparkle. You've got an ontology language called OWL, which lets you create more restrictions on your data structure. You can create rules using Sharple. So it's quite a sophisticated set of standards that's been developed by the W3C. And with an inferencing engine, you can actually deduce new knowledge from what you have. And so what you can end up with, I mean, normally they're a lot bigger than this. This is really cut down just to show small scale. You've got triples that are connected to each other. They're different colours, are different knowledge silos. You can interlink them based on common URIs. And you can do reasoning across them. So this is a knowledge graph. I'm not going to go through this in any detail at all, but just to show you there's a formal semantics based on logic that this is based on. And don't worry if you can't read that, because part of my PhD was to create an English syntax for it so you can read it in English. It's called Sydney syntax. But it's maths. Okay, so what you can then do, you've got a knowledge graph like this, and you can ask a question. Was the star of Annie Hall directed by the star of a film produced by Letty Aronson? So if you look at that graph, you can find a chain where you can work out yes. And what you can actually do is return the 4 triples that contribute to that answer. So you can have the answer and why that is the answer. You can justify it. So that's a lot different from machine learning, right? Having said that, machine learning is useful for a lot of use cases, particularly perceptual type stuff, and Surround does use machine learning for a lot of things in combination with semantics. So I work for Surround as of the last couple of months, They are specialists in semantic technologies. They're targeting these areas for explainable AI, and that's their vision, our vision, to be the leading ethical explainable AI enabler in the Australasian region. If you have a spare 30 grand or so, you're welcome to join in the current round of investment funding. We're looking for 4 million funding at the moment. That's the offering that Surround has. We have 3 platforms: the ontology platform, the explainable AI platform, and the knowledge, observation and reasoning platform. And yeah, that's pretty much all I really wanted to say, but just in conclusion, my conclusions are we can't trust computers, and we shouldn't assume that we can, we should assume that we can't, and we should make sure that we have fail-safe mechanisms. Robots are only going to be our friends if we make it so, and we should treat that as an engineering requirement, not as a debate. There needs to be work on defining ethics for decision making for AI. There needs to be serious work on that. People need to get involved in it. It shouldn't just be academics. It shouldn't just be people, in corporations. It should be at a society level. It needs a mathematics of morality, but it needs a lot of people to be involved in that process. And then just the machine learning and semantic stuff. Machine learning isn't good at justifying its decisions. The semantic approach is. It gives you a transparent chain of reasoning for explainable AI. And Surround Australia is a provider of explainable AI. And that's, thank you for listening. Any questions?
Are you vegetarian?
Am I vegetarian? No, I was.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, love that work that I'm seeing out of that and finding answering, I guess, some of those questions, and I guess it will make the technology more appealing to a lot of people. Do you still see a space for a black box, or do you think it's going to be completely overtaken by explainable AI?
No, I think there's completely still space for machine learning. When you need the probabilistic approach, when you don't have, a deductive kind of a thing, then yes, use machine learning. But use it in combination, use both in combination. If you've got something where, you can write a rule for it, or you can make it explicit and make the logic explicit, then do that. Do that as much as you can. Just use machine learning where you need to, where you've got, if you want to recognise a cat, or the difference between a cat and a tiger, then you probably need to use machine learning to do that. That's it's fuzzy. It's probably a good use for machine learning, but machine learning at the moment I think is being overused. It's being used for a lot of things where it would be better to use a more explicit, overt approach.
Thank you for your talk, because you made me remember what happened in history where economics went into the mathematical by trying to measure utility. The problem many mathematical economists have is, one, the idea of utility, which is satisfaction, differs from one individual to another. Like some will get pleasure from drinking just a bottle of beer, others need 3. And the second problem is oftentimes forgotten, is the definition of economic efficiency. That it's not maximum profitability, or even maximum pleasure. It's the ability to develop a general positive outcome without causing harm.
Yes.
So I just wanted to throw that question. Do you feel the same conflict or dilemmas when you seek a mathematical model towards an ethics in explainable AI?
Yeah, there's a lot of those sorts of things to consider. What's the highest good of one person may not be for someone else.
Yeah.
Different people have different things that they enjoy, that they like and that they don't like. Yeah, it can be quite specific to the human being.
And it will depend on who wields more power over the other, not necessarily who provides the economic efficiency for society.
Well, that's why I want to have the debate at the level of society rather than leaving it in the hands of individuals and corporations, because I think it will just be a mess if we don't tackle it, properly, the way we tackle things like laws. Okay, we tackle laws at a social level, at a society level. I think we need to do a similar thing with AI rather than just leave it in the hands of individuals and corporations and companies. Yeah.
That spells some problems in funding in terms of some companies will say, I want it in that direction, otherwise I won't fund it or even withdraw.
Yeah, that'll probably be an issue.
How do you stop it?
Just say that next time.
No, I mean with the laws, we can bring as many laws as we want, but it doesn't mean much if we just ignore it.
Yeah, true. I guess it's like the W3C recommendations.
Your recommendations.
Thank you. Lovely to meet you.
Society actually wants to have that discussion.
Sorry?
Society actually wants to have that discussion.
I don't know.
Because like we try
I don't know.
to get everyone to talk about
I want to have it. I don't know if anyone. I think people here, some people here want to have it. Yeah,
Sure.
I've seen some nods.
I guess when you start talking about broader society, I'm like,
I know a lot of people aren't ready for it, aren't interested,
yeah,
but some of us need to be.
do you have any success?
That's why I appreciate the opportunity to talk
Yeah.
because there are people that will listen.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, other than the Rock being in the CRISPR movie, like I don't, yeah.
Could you run the semantic and the machine learning in tandem? Because I get the impression that if you just went semantic approach because it combines of the input, that you might miss out like chess with it and finding their own moves, where you might find something the machine learning could teach you that you didn't think of it completely.
Yeah. No, we actually think that they're best run together in tandem, where you use the strength of each where it's most appropriate. Okay.
What are the ideal use cases for semantics versus a machine learning approach?
I guess where you've got something that's explicit and rule-based and a deductive kind of
Kind of the way that
something like the legal domain where you've got laws and you code and knowledge.
One of the things that I came across is the laws of these things, and this guy that got fired by the computer, we've been running scenarios on venue security and evacuations and computers making decisions based on what seems to be obvious. We code it, we go, there's more, if you can save more people by closing this door and doing this, then do it. There is actually no laws at the moment, from we know, in most of the world, that limit anyone from doing anything like that. Like those guys who get prosecuted under a law because his life was made difficult. Because if someone did that from identity theft and broke him, and you can get people killed legally, which can shut down a lot of things. You don't want to be dead legally. In that your bank accounts get automatically shut down, things get frozen, a lot of things go very, very bad if you're dead in the system. But if we did that through malice, there's offences. But when a system accidentally does it, there's nothing. There's no, especially when it accidentally does it.
There's no accountability, no one's held responsible for it.
I mean, if I said, Alexa or robot, kill this person, that's, hey, might be, it's probably easily trainable offence. But if I went, hey, go and do the gardening, and it misheard me, and then said, go and kill someone, and when it did it,
Go and do the garroting.
who then is, because I didn't have intent, but then is the coder that didn't write the code recognition well enough? There's a lot of very complicated things going on with our manslaughter. Well, it's not manslaughter, because I said
the coder.
Yeah, well, the coder, but who's the coder? It's one of 27 coders at
What if it
Amazon.
involves that capability independently? As a mutation or, comes...
Or as a virus and things
No,
like that. No, as a virus. We used to have fun at work one day, changing people's autocorrects in their word. So they'd type a word and it automatically autocorrect. dear sir, it'd be like, fuck off, sir. But imagine if you actually hacked that, so when someone said turn on the lights, it did something much worse.
What if, Anne, in your situation, when you were explaining, there's no explanation for arriving at a conclusion, and he's come to the conclusion.
There's nothing we can understand, but in machine learning, there is something. It's just that we don't know.
No, what I'm saying is if it
view.
comes to that conclusion, and there's no explainable methodology behind it that we can see, how would that be trialled in a court of law? Which should the developer that did the general basis?
Well, that's a good question.
The court just
Right?
goes,
Or should it be like a child that up to a certain age of maturity or existence or cycles, it is property of the original developer. Then after a certain age, after it becomes 18 years old, whatever that might be, then it becomes an independent entity. And
it's complicated. Shanti and I are speaking in Adelaide next week at the Global Legal Summit about just this. It's not about technology and law, it's about the law of technology. And it's not a keynote, it's a key idea at the moment because everyone's confused. The law society's confused, the Supreme Court's confused. I've talked to Supreme Court judges that just go, do I have to be on the bench for this happens? They don't know what to do.
No, it's a good question.
There's no
Machines
cops.
make decisions.
Yeah.
Who's responsible?
And when do you get to the law? There's no cops that understand what's going on, no prosecutors understand what's going on, no, all the entire chain, like from juries to the whole structure of the legal process. There is no framework, there's not even a pool of who are qualified prosecutors, who are qualified cops to actually know whether they should arrest you or not, and to qualify all the way up, even court staff knowing what is evidence there's nothing. The entire path is broken at the moment. Not even evidence of how you record an EEG thought trigger on I killed someone with that. Or how do you do chain of evidence with regards to Alexa and there's just, because I can trigger my Alexa getting my computer from home, getting my PC to talk in there. So I just get the iMac to say something, I get the iMac to say something from remotely, which will get these Alexas to do something else. How do you prove that you didn't do it? And it's just, even they how do they prove, how do you not prove it? It's a mess. It's a huge mess of data.
Can I ask just one question? Should you always, even with the semantic approach, should you always have a human in the loop at some point?
No.
Not necessarily. But I think we need to think through under what circumstances we allow machines to make decisions and what they need to provide to us in terms of explainability and what algorithms they're allowed to use to make them.
But the areas with a high ethicality, if that's a word, shouldn't humans always be there on those particular decisions?
What if
I can see why you want to do that.
You're right, they should be there. But could they be there?
But the thing is they're not.
Exactly.
It's already happening.
Well, I mean, we could always say they should be there, but like one of the scenarios we did was like evacuation of a sports stadium with a lot of people, and the security guards are just too slow. If we've got the MIs and they're going, okay, that many people, open those gates, close those gates, open those gates, close those gates, and you could say put the human in the loop where he goes yes or no, and it's just got the MI yelling and screaming at him, going.
What about the driverless car?
Yeah, there's 20,000.
Probably won't have time to intervene.
But the thing with the driverless car is the fact that we can suffer 60,000 deaths on the American roads a year, say, if that's the figure. But if one person gets killed with a fault in their system, then we think all hell's breaking loose. So it's that perception of risk, because we can accept.
Yeah, it's the question of what's an acceptable risk.
There is a solution for this, or a proposed solution. It's still not good.
See, if I get into a taxi with a person, we're sharing that risk of an accident, and I'm betting he doesn't want to kill himself.
Oh,
right. So you know what I mean. Unless it's an MH3 thing.
It's your trust.
Yes.
Yeah, 747 deaths.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people that want to.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, there's an unsaid thing that if he's in the car, he's not going to kill himself, but if I'm safe. You
don't know his ideology?
Yeah, but I'm assuming. That's all.
Weaponising of assumptions is a whole
But
lot.
the fact of the matter is you'd actually be safer with the driverless car.
Oh, I know that, but with people, the idea of the bell, of the lift, and the automatic lift.
Okay, do we need 2 minutes? Will we talk? Yes, oh sorry, thank you, sorry Anne, thank you so much. Akin actually just told her she was coming along, and I'm like, no, you're speaking. She's like, what? I'm like, you're speaking. And she's like, okay. I'm like, you're too smart not to speak at this audience, right? Okay, so do we need a little break? Okay, so give us 2 minutes and we'll kick on with the next one.
Yeah, okay.